And good morning. I'm Deb Welch, and I would like to warmly welcome you to Carney, Sandoe Associates' first session of a three-part webinar. I'd like to take a moment and introduce my colleagues who are on the call. So I'll ask you colleagues to wave and to say hello. First of all, Jihan, John Chandler, Art Charles, Theodora Kanutsova, and Julie Landis. We'd like to warmly welcome you. Our webinar today focuses on what does your screen say about you? And the session will focus on before, during, and after the interview. We aren't focusing on questions or ways to prepare in terms of the content of the webinar today, but rather the actual presentation aspects, such as the background and the lighting, and how you can, in a sense, evaluate how you do after the session. Those aspects that relate to preparing for the content aspect will be in the third session of our webinar series. We will have different Carney Sandoe Associates take the lead for different sessions. So today it is G and myself who will take that lead, but my fellow colleagues, please feel free to join in when you have something that you would like to make note of. We are extremely aware of the demands upon your time, and so we are framing this as, in a sense, a bite-sized chunk to give you a lot of content quickly. But we also know that you may well have questions, and so we will all be staying on for 15 minutes after the session, and we'll be able to take questions at that point. Know that throughout this session, we'll ask you if you have questions to go ahead and put them in the chat. And Julie is serving for us, in a sense, as our wing woman. That is, she's gathering the questions throughout the session. She will be identifying themes, and then she'll be feeding them to us during that last 15 minutes. But also know, sometimes you have a very personal question, something that you would like to ask for yourself. And that's fine. What we will do is after this session, you will receive an email from us that will have our email addresses. Feel free to reach out to us, because what we can do is arrange a time to talk with you individually. Also, please put your audio on mute. And again, any questions, any thoughts, just put them in the chat. So let's set the context up. You have an interview for a leadership position. It is with a school somewhere in another place in the world, and you literally do not know anyone who is going to be on the screen. You have 45 minutes to an hour to make the impression that you want to make. Now, a lot of that, of course, is your responses to questions. But today, as we focus on all of the things that you can do to make sure that your screen communicates in the best possible light who you are as a candidate that they want to get to know better. After literally hundreds of Zoom interviews that we have conducted across the field, we have identified tips that we have found put you as a candidate in the best light. So let us provide those again during the before, during, and after segments. Also know that this is based upon an article that was sent to you yesterday. And let me just briefly screen share the table that was in that article so that you can see there is, We've set it up for tips, preparation notes, and after action review notes. And we literally encourage you to download this and to go through it before, during, and after the interview with notes. And then again, after, to reflect upon how you feel you did and make changes and additions so that the next time you're all the better prepared. So with that then, let's take a look at what does your screen say about you in terms of the background. And I'm going to ask that, if possible, we have the camera focus briefly on, let's go to Art Charles first. Can you see Art?
Hi, Deb. How you doing?
Let's see. Yeah. So think about, what's your impression of Art? Now, can we go to Jihan for a minute? Yeah. So what might be some things that we would note about Art and we would note about G? Just think those through mentally in your mind. And by the way, let me pause just for a moment so that you know that this is being recorded. And in addition to the article being sent to you again after the session, please know that we will send you a link to this recording so that you can review it. So we looked at Art and we looked at G in terms of their backgrounds. Now let's go to John briefly for a minute. Think about what you notice about John, and let's go to Theodora. We wanted to make the point that the background that you have on your Zoom screen makes a tremendous difference in terms of making it easy for search committees to understand who you are and to get to know you. It is astonishing when the lighting is such, when the background is such that in a sense it contaminates your visual, that it doesn't enable you to communicate the best impression. What we find is that backgrounds that are in a sense loud, backgrounds that in a sense have a lot going on, distract committees, distract interviewers. They have a hard time knowing where to focus. And that goes for you in terms of your appearance and what you wear, as well as your background. So for example, today I am in a different setting. I'm visiting in San Diego as opposed to being in my home in Boulder. Now in Boulder, Colorado, my office is set up for virtual calls. I've thought about the color of what's behind me. I've thought about the lighting, but here I am in a new setting, much as many times you might be for an interview. You might be traveling, you might be in a hotel room, you might be in a friend's house. So what's best to know about the lighting? What's best to know about the background? Well, for example, I have a large wall sculpture on the wall behind me. And yesterday during our rehearsal, my team said, Deb, that's distracting because you're always looking for what is that's on the wall. Just as when you've got paintings or many, many things behind you, committees start to look at those things rather than at you. We find that soft backgrounds, white or light colors, plants, many times books that are on a bookshelf communicate a professional background that is uncluttered and sees you in the best light. We know that sometimes Zoom screens are used that have that background for you. And those are fine. Just be careful when you move that shows. And yes, we have a Zoom screen that G is showing us that looks a bit busy. It might definitely communicate an impression to us. But again, our focus is not on G. All of these make the point, you are your most important visual. You want those people interviewing you to focus on you in the best light. And sometimes I find, even with jewelry, I see a dangling pair of earrings that looks like it's going into orbit, And I find myself sort of being lost in the person's earring. Now, what about dress? Again, a professional dress communicates that you are taking this job seriously. We find there is actually no way, in a sense, to overdress in the sense of, should you wear a suit? Should you wear a tie? That always impresses committees. It's not always necessary. For example, it's not necessary to have a suit jacket on, but something that communicates professional dress, that goes beyond the t-shirt, that goes beyond the fleece jacket, lets the committee know that you want this job. You are taking your time with them seriously. We also find that lighting is so important, and lighting can be so tricky. And that's why many times people purchase the portable lights that can be bought now for $25 to $50 because they communicate a soft background. So when we think about lighting that is behind us tends to be too jarring and glaring unless it's really soft. We are looking for lighting that is behind us, lighting that reflects back at us in that soft vein. Sometimes if your laptop is against a wall, it might even be worth it to pull the laptop out and to have one of the portable lamps that projects against the wall so that the light comes back at you. Cameras are also very tricky, but we find that cameras are getting better and better with the newer laptops. But again, a simple $25 camera can make a big difference. Excuse me, this was a $50 camera, can make a big difference in terms of showing you in the best light. The important thing, though, is to note that the camera should be at eye level. We want to see you looking into the camera and not looking into the screen. It's very jarring to try to make a connection with you as a candidate and to have your eyes not on us. That's why it's so important if you have an external monitor that you're not looking at the monitor at an angle, because again, you're cutting off that connection with your interviewers. So it's worth it. Give yourself a test in terms of a Zoom meeting with yourself and try the laptop at different angles. You may want to lift the laptop up and put it on a stack of books in order to have the laptop be at eye level. But try it out beforehand. Do that test so that you know, how is it that I project best? How is it that I am seen best? And with that is, of course, the audio as well. I like using earphones because I like having the direct audio connection. But if you are in a quiet environment and your audio, your speaker works well, it's not necessary. But sometimes we see interviewers that use headphones that aren't aware that they're creating static. They're creating static for the interviewers, and it becomes very jarring. So all of these things can be done before to make sure that you've got it ready for when you actually have the interview. Now it's interview time. We're going to go to during, but having set up all of those things will put you much more at ease. It's okay to have a water bottle with you. It's okay to have some fluids and some liquids. You're setting up the stage so that as soon as you come on the Zoom screen and the camera is on you, you feel ready and you feel confident to address those questions that are so important. So now the environment's set up. let's go to G, who's going to take us to the second section, the during the actual interview itself.
Thank you so much, Deb. You've done a great job setting us up. One of the things I wanted to note while Deb was speaking is I noted that she spoke with a very measured pace. Oftentimes we're in interviews, we want to speak really quickly because we're very nervous, because we want to get through and we're mindful of time. But that is something that really to be conscious about. So now it's time for the interview. You've made it through. First of all, congratulations. The fact that you are in an online interview and able to present yourself means that your materials and your background has been very interesting for the search committee. So that means you can go in with a certain amount of confidence that you have what the search committee is looking for. And remember that what we have on the inside will often show on the outside. And a lot of the concepts that we would do face-to-face of how we want to present ourselves are going to be the same virtually. So in the end, the best advice is always to be authentic, to be positive. And in the end, we want to assume that good things are happening because people take cues from what they hear and what they see. So let's start with taking questions. When you get a question, sometimes, especially if that question resonates with you, you might want to say thank you to the interviewer for giving you that question, because they want to know that their questions are relevant and be appreciated. If you are not clear exactly about what that question is about, please do not hesitate to ask for clarification or ask for a reframing. Interviewers, just like you, are also sometimes a little bit nervous. They're doing their best and they might not be able to ask the question as clearly. So it's absolutely okay to ask for a clarification. You might say something like, just to make sure I understand you correctly, or this is what I think you're asking, so that they'll give you that clarification. Absolutely clear in any time you're in an interview is to answer the question that they ask, and try not to go off tangent, because that is distracting, and it signals to the interviewer that you haven't really been listening. Okay, so you've got questions. One of the questions we know that are always asked is this: why this job? Why this school? So I know that you've thought about that in your interview process and in your cover letter, but please make sure that you have an answer ready for that particular question, because if that's not the first question, that's certainly going to be one of the first questions. And of course, you don't have to give a pre-scripted answer, but it's something that the interviewers and the school community are going to want to know about you and be very curious about. All right, we're going to go into this idea of nonverbals. Nonverbals, as we know, are so powerful, and we can't say enough how much those nonverbals make, both in person and online. One of the first things, as Deb mentioned, is whenever possible, you really want to be looking at the screen. Oftentimes you will have notes, as I do. If possible, you might want to have the notes up in front on a screen, or maybe a little bit on a board, because when you're looking down all the time, it also can be quite distracting. Oftentimes you might want to take notes because they ask you a very long question, or you want to make several points. If you are going to be taking notes, it might not be a bad idea to tell the interviewer, you know what, I'm going to be taking notes, if that's okay. And they themselves will also be taking notes as well. But remember, if you're constantly looking down at your paper or looking at other places or shuffling papers, that again will be distracting. So as much as possible, you want to have your face forward to the camera, as you would when you're having a conversation. People want to see your face, they want to see your eyes, and they want to, as much as possible, have that eye contact. The other thing is that oftentimes, as in this webinar case, they will be recording you. And that feeling can be quite disconcerting, but that really is so that the interview committees or the interviewer people can go back and listen deeply because they genuinely are interested in your answers. So they usually will ask if it's okay to be recorded, and hopefully you'll be able to say yes, because that will also signal to them that you are open and that you are excited and you want them to hear your answers. I spoke a little bit about pacing and volume. I often find it very difficult to get the volume right because I've got earplugs in and there's lots of things going around, but really that volume is quite important. So checking ahead to make sure that you're not on mute, major mistake that we've all made, but practicing that and hearing that and really making sure that you speak in the same volume you would when you're speaking to somebody in a conversation, and not speak too loud, and not often the case speak too quietly. Because one of the most frustrating things that an interviewer can feel is when the person speaks so quietly and so a little bit unclearly that they can't quite get it. And if they can't understand what you're saying, and if they don't feel that you've got something coming from within, they're also going to get disengaged as well. And finally, if anything, as we know, with all things, our attitude is such a great precursor of our success. And so you need to be yourself. You can be personable. When you're answering the questions, it's okay to refer to your family or somebody key in the community, because they know then that relationships are valuable to you. Just not that you're going on long about a family vacation, but you want to mention your family members because they know that those are the people that are important to you. And it's also okay to share anecdotes about a recent incident. Again, it helps them put you into context to know that you are somebody who is genuine and has stories to share. The last thing is that when you're in an interview, not that you should do it inauthentically, but of course, as much as possible, you want to have more of a smiling presence, if you will. I mean, not Cheshire cat grin, but to have that smile, because again, when you're looking at a 2D image and you see kind of a grave, serious, kind of sad looking face, that's a mirroring thing. So if you can present a positive, more upbeat, and if possible, of course, as our grandmothers would say, a good straight posture, that's going to portray confidence, positivity, and this idea that you are the person that they want to be working with. So that's all from me. I don't know if anybody from the team would like to join in, but again, remember, when you're at the interview stage, that means you have something positive to give to the community, and you are somebody worth considering. So keep that in your mind. Be confident, be positive, be authentic.
Great. Thank you, G. So we've talked about before, we've talked about during, now it's after the interview, right? You feel that release that, okay, I did it. But that is the prime time for learning. We encourage you, again, to take the table out and to look at, in a sense, after action review notes. Go back and think to yourself, how did I do? What about the picture that I presented? Was I my authentic, honest self? Was there anything that I could have set up differently? And of course, we will be talking in session 3 about the actual content of your responses. But so much of this now at this point is, was I relaxed? Did I connect with the group? Did my voice project? Was the lighting good? We encourage you to write a thank you note to the people who are interviewing you. That interviewer may be us, someone with a search committee, or it may be a search committee. It may consist of boxes on the screen of people who have viewed your paperwork. We encourage you, and actually this is another before step, to find out how many people are on the screen before your actual interview. And if possible, through the person who is the liaison, ask who, what it is they do, what is their relationship to the school, so that you have an understanding of them. If you are interviewing and it happens to be for a head of school position, you may well have board members whose bios are on the website so that you have some of that background. If it's a senior leadership position, you may be able to look at the website and see, is this a principal? Is this a director? But knowing who they are is going to help you gain that familiarity and feel comfortable again beforehand. To then follow up with a thank you note that is direct to the people who interviewed you. And just like we like notes that are specific to us, where we know that indeed the interviewers have read our resume, they have read our statement of philosophical intent, they are curious about us, and they give you specific feedback so that they say things to you specifically. Thank you so much for the example that you provided in your cover letter about the work that you have done with strategic planning and the results that has brought about in your school. Well, then you too, when you are writing that thank you note back to your interviewers, you are specific. Thank you so much for the questions that focused on the pedagogical side to my background. I feel by the questions that you are asked that we have a direct link between your needs and my experience. So in other words, you're using that thank you letter to express appreciation, but you are also coming back to that question, why me? You are giving them the words that sum you up as a candidate. And you are showing them your appreciation and your gratitude for the time that they gave you. So, important tips about after. Reflect on the experience. This is a skill. Interviewing is a skill. The more you do it, the more feedback you get, the better you become. And write thank you notes. If we then put together before, during, and after, you are ready. These sessions, in a sense, provide you with what you need to step up and step out. Please know that session 2, which will focus on, is your resume eye-catching, as well as the cover letter will serve that purpose. And session 3, to say or not to say, will focus on how can you anticipate what questions the interviewers will be asking you so that you can be prepared in advance. So all 3 of these will enable you to, in a sense, rest assured that your bases are covered. An interview is, after all, a wonderful opportunity for you to speak about your leadership journey with passion and for you to communicate who you are as a person as well as a leader. You want to take the opportunity that you have. You want to take that moment to put your best authentic self forward. Please know that you can register for sessions 2 and 3 on the Carney Sandoe website, where you registered for this session as well. So let's take then a moment, and we told you that we would do 15 minutes in addition to our 30 minutes for questions that any one of us, any one of the Carney Sandoe representatives can respond to. But Julie, we'll ask you were there questions that emerged in the chat that we can address right now? Or should we go to the participants and ask any questions directly to us?
Julie, I think you're on mute.
I'm wondering if Julie's
she's
audio
having-
might be.
Yeah, so maybe
Yeah.
she's.
Well, let's go ahead then and open it up to participants. If you have a question that you would like to ask us, just go ahead and unmute and ask us directly.
So wonderful to see all of your faces.
Oh.
Lovely.
We literally have people from all over the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd love.
You know, I always say that my favorite person in the group is the person who asks the first question.
Is the blurred background, is that okay?
Good question. Is a blurred background okay? We have varying sentiments about that, actually, Michael. We think that a blurred background is okay if it is the best background that you can put together at the time, right? Because of your circumstances, it's best that the background be blurred because the background that you have is just not acceptable. However, we would prefer a background that is not blurred, that totally communicates the message about who you are as a professional.
That also goes for the virtual backgrounds as well. I know that sometimes there were stories about people who had like palm trees in the background, and that's lovely, I think, as a sentiment. But again, for an interview, anything that's distracting or that's not maybe authentic, if they know that you're in Zurich, Switzerland, I am, and then suddenly I have a palm tree behind me, that seems a little strange. So whenever possible, I think long story short is to have that genuine professional space where you are. And then of course you have to make the best if you are not able to do that. We've got some questions in the chat, Deb, maybe.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
I do have a question that came in from our registration in advance. And the question is, what distance is the ideal view for the other side? What do I do if I can't see the people interviewing me, if they're too far or too small away?
Excellent question. Carney, Sandoe reps, anyone have something that you would like to say in response to that?
That's an important question, actually, because if you've got a search committee in particular who are meeting together in a meeting room, the chances are that you will either be so unable to see their faces clearly around a table because they'll be so small, or you won't hear all those, you won't be able to connect faces with voices. What we would encourage search committees, and do encourage search committees, is to make it clear how the interview is going to be structured. Very often they will agree that either one person will ask a specific question and they'll go around the room, or alternatively, that one or two will ask all the questions and the others will take notes as they go.
I agree with that, and I will just add 2 cents to this. It won't be the last or first time that you're in a situation like this, because a lot of people think about board meetings. You may speak to a board that is in a conference room together, and you will see tiny little faces, and you will definitely not be able to read expressions. You may not be able to hear very well. So just call it out. confrontational about it. But the committee will be people who will expect to see you in other situations like this, and it will be important for them to hear how you act and how you handle this. So all you can just say, I apologize, I cannot really read your faces. It's a little distant. So if you don't mind, I may ask you to repeat questions or speak up. It's only because the aspect of the ratio in my screen is so small. That way, everybody knows you appreciate the situation and you're aware, and they give you a little bit of slack for not responding as you would if this were a one-on-one conversation.
Deb, I have a couple of questions I can ask. One is, you know, when you're traveling or you're even living in a second or third country, you don't always have control over the backgrounds and that kind of thing. You do the best you can. Can a background be too severe? I know you've said avoid the distractions, the paintings, the sculpture. And the second one is, you know, to Theo's point a little bit, sometimes the interviewers are off camera. And I'm wondering how you navigate that. I find that can be a little disconcerting when you're speaking. Even the person asking the questions isn't necessarily on camera. So I wonder what your thoughts are on those two.
Yes. Thanks, Will. So yes, backgrounds can be too severe, and it might be time to consider one of the Zoom artificial backgrounds if you feel that that is the case. I actually was concerned about my background today because it is a new background and it's all white. You know, I would prefer a little warmer color, but at least there's dimension to it and it's not too distracting. But those are our considerations, you know, what actually does the background look like? And I, again, do a test run to actually see. It's not that the background has to be, you know, I don't think we need to communicate that it needs to be luxurious or really fancy. It just needs to not distract and to communicate that professional message that you want. And lighting, again, is so important. So many times we have candidates who literally are in the dark because the lighting is not good where they are. And then secondly, Will, your second question had to do with, go ahead and repeat that, please.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there can sometimes be a very small image or a number of images, but what I've also confronted is that sometimes there'll be some on camera, sometimes only one on camera, or a combination of the two. And I'm wondering, how do you tackle that? You know, you want to connect, you've prepared your background and so forth, but you're speaking to a name or a number of names.
Yes.
Can I try that, Deb?
Absolutely.
Will, you can't control what's going to happen on the other side. But the one thing that you can control is how they perceive you. And if you think about the reason for this interview is the search committee wants to know if you are a person who can project interest in this job and if you'll be a good spokesperson for the community. So the best advice I can give is, yes, be authentic, be yourself, but don't be afraid to put a little expression, a little passion to explain to them why you'd be why this job appeals to you, what you love about the school, and why you could present this school to the community. And that community could be a group of 600 parents sitting in a room, and you can't see them at all. You really are in the dark. So you can't control that side, but what you can control is what's on this side of the camera, and put some passion into your responses.
Yeah, thanks.
I do have another question I can share. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, a question I've got, I'm just looking at the different sizes of our own faces on the screen here. Some of us are quite close, some of us a little bit further away with shoulders showing and so on. Is there an optimal distance that we should be from the screen so that it's not distracting and too close and not too far away.
So Kathy, take a look at, for example, right now, I believe G and I are prominent on the screen. We try to have at least, in a sense, shoulders up be the frame. And we try not to have the top of the screen cut off our head. So that's about the size of the image, in a sense, for you on the screen, to not have it be overpowering, but not also have you be lost.
Thank you. Thanks.
I do have a question I can share with the group. Well, it's more of a comment, but I think it's a great talking point. Somebody mentioned that a number of times they've had connection problems. So when they have a virtual interview, they make sure to have a second device as a backup in case their computer gets disconnected or they need to call back. Could you maybe speak to what happens in that instance if you do get disconnected, or if you're having tech issues? What is a good approach to that situation when you're in an interview?
Anyone from the team like to take that?
It's happened to all of us.
Yes.
I'm on the coast of Maine right now, for example, and I gave our team a heads up that I may very well lose my power sometime in the call this morning. If you're worried about it happening, get it out there early, and do keep in mind that they want to have this conversation with you as much as you do with them. So follow up right away as you can and try to reestablish the connection would be my first advice.
Such good advice. You know, and it happens in so many different ways. You don't have audio, you don't have video, you don't have any connection. Yesterday, I was on a call where we didn't have audio and we started communicating via the chat, and then we went to a phone call. And I find the more times this happens, the more adept we get at problem solving quickly. So always having your phone close by is a very good strategy to help you problem solve.
One of the things we didn't mention is oftentimes these interviews are in the middle of your day. We're dealing with time zones. You have daytime jobs that are quite demanding, and interview schools are always asking for you to have an interview at a time that's convenient for them and not necessarily convenient for you. And we want to accommodate, but if at all possible, you probably know this, but to build in a buffer before we went on for this webinar, we came in on much earlier. We kind of put ourselves in the frame. We kind of rediscussed everything, and then to give yourself, if possible, a buffer afterwards as well, whenever possible, so that you're not rushing in and you're definitely not rushing out. Because again, that gives the interviewer a sense that you are important to them and that you are putting aside this time for them, because you know they want to know how important they are to you in that sense. So those are probably things that you know to be true, but it's always worth a reminder, because we have that tendency to pack our schedules back to back. So even if it's 5-10 minutes buffer, it's better than nothing. So that's just thought occurred to me.
Well, thank you so much. And please, again, know that we will send you our individual email addresses, so that if you have a question and would like to reach out to us individually, we're more than happy to respond to you. We actually don't mind if you want to just do a quick Zoom call with us. We'll tell you how your background looks, how the lighting looks, how the audio sounds, and provide you with any tips to make sure that you're able to do all of that in advance and put your best look, in a sense, forward. So thank you so much. We appreciate you coming and being a part of this webinar, and know that On November 30th, we will have our second one, is your resume eye-catching? And during that one, we will also talk about the cover letter. Again, after viewing literally hundreds, if not thousands of resumes and listening to what search committees as well as leadership teams, how they respond to them, we have some tips and some strategies for you. And then, of course, session 3, December 7th, to say or not to say. How can you anticipate what questions will be asked in advance? And how is it that your answers get evaluated? So on behalf of the Carney Sandoe Team International, we want to thank you. We want you to step up and stand out, and are here to help you put your best self forward so that you can communicate who you are as a leader, who you are, that you want the interviewing committee to know who you are so that you can get that position. Thank you so much.
Bye, thank you.